Hello! In today's video, we're going to go over tips, skills, drills, and strength exercises to increase your putting power and accuracy. And I'm going to do this with a little tour from our head all the way down to our legs. My putting has improved significantly in the short time that I've been playing. Is my putting perfect? Absolutely not, but I'm much more confident now in Circle 2 and can feel comfortable making bids from there and actually making putts. So I'm going to show you the tips and tricks that I've learned along the way that have improved my putting, and hopefully they can help yours as well. Just one quick note before we start. Putting is very personal, so what I do might not exactly work for your exact putting style. So just try to fit it in however you can and maybe adjust a couple things to fit your personal putting style. So let's start the tour with our head and talk about mentality. It's difficult athletically to improve without a specific goal. So for our putting technique, our specific goal should be developing a clean, smooth, consistent release point every single time so we can repeat it over and over again. The second thing mentally we should be doing is focusing solely on the putt at hand, especially if it's a longer one that you might be afraid to make that comeback putt. Don't think about the comeback putt, because when you start thinking about that comeback putt, that's when you're going to miss the putt you're working on at that exact moment. The final point mentally we should be doing is focusing on a specific aiming point. Yes, you can focus specifically on the pole. I like to be more fine than that. I like to focus on a specific link in the chain. For longer putts, you may have to aim higher. Specific aiming points will come with repetition. So you're going to have to practice your putts. All right, now that we've talked about the mental side of things, let's talk about our grip and our wrist. This is my putting grip. It's a typical fan grip, what most people use, but within the fan grip, there's different ways you can do it. The important thing about the grip is you should be able to repeat it every single time, once again, to aid in that consistent release point. I do have a couple of quick tips that I have. One, I like to keep my finger under the rim. That helps me get the rim nose up when I'm putting. Also, if you're having trouble with too much hyzer on your putt, put more pressure on your fingers here under the plate of the disc. That way it will straighten the putt out for you. There's two little tricks that I learned along the way about getting a little bit more power in your putt. One, if you move your thumb a little bit more towards the rim, that'll give you a little bit more pop. I have found that gives you a lot less control. So it's something you're gonna have to really experiment with and maybe break out only when you really need to. And for the push putters out there, one way you can get a little more pop in your putt is when you're coming up at release point, give it a little extra with your middle finger, and that will provide a little extra pop and a little extra power in your putt. We also don't want to hold the putter too tight. We want to have a nice comfortable grip on it. That way we can keep our later tip, our arm, nice and smooth and relaxed. Now we can move on to our wrist. Our wrist is going to provide a lot of snap and spin at our putt at release point. That's what our wrist pop and hand pop are at release point. As we're moving our hand forward, our wrist should flex and then extend, and our hand should pop some version of this. One tip we want to have is to make sure we don't pop our wrist too far, because that's going to make our putt go way to the right like that. So we want to make sure we stop it and keep it neutral here. Also, when I draw my putt back, I like to keep my wrist in a neutral position and not cock it beforehand. Some people are a little bit different, but that's what I like to do. And as I'm moving forward towards the basket, I let my wrist naturally cock and then pop with my hand pop. When we talk about a wrist snap, we also need to talk about the different types of wrist snap, because depending on your putting style, you're going to have a different type of wrist snap or wrist opening, whatever you want to call it. Push putters will supinate the wrist, and basically that means turning your thumb outwards, almost like you're holding a bowl of soup. Spin putters are going to pronate their wrist a little bit more, almost like you're pouring out a cup of tea. Important distinction between the two that you need to figure out with your personal putting style. Let me show you a couple of exercises to strengthen both of those patterns. Here we are doing some dumbbell supinations. If you notice, my forearm is on the bench, taking the elbow out of the equation. This is great for arm health and our wrist strength. Doing about 2-3 sets of 10 to 15 will do you well. Then we're going to switch it over to some dumbbell pronations. Once again, doing about 10 to 15 reps, 2 or 3 sets, depending on where you're at with your physical fitness. Here's a quick drill that will help you with your wrist pop and release point. Will also help you figure out where your best grip is. It's Calvin Heinberg drill. I learned this on Instagram. All you're going to do is take a disc, stand here, and hold the disc out in front of you, and just work on getting a consistent release point while working on getting a nice pop and smooth release out of your hand. Notice I'm not using really much of my elbow or my body. I'm just working on my wrist and release point. Definitely hard to do this while you're talking and filming. You can really work on getting it high and getting a good amount of power out of your wrist pop as well. You can also play with your grip to see which one really pops out of your hand and what feels most comfortable at the same time. Here I'm working the wrist pop to the ceiling every single time. You can also add to the difficulty of this drill. Typically I wouldn't do this on this bench, but I'm here filming. Usually I do this at the bar at my house. Put your elbow on a flat surface and just work on your wrist pop this way, taking the rest of the arm out of the equation. Now you might notice after doing this drill for a little while, your forearm gets a little tired. Our forearm is oftentimes overlooked with our training, but it's something that's extremely important not only for our disc golf putting and putting power, but also our overall disc golf arm health. So let me show you a couple of exercises you can do in order to improve that area, make it stronger, make the endurance last longer, so when you're at the end of those rounds, your putting still remains strong and consistent. Before I move to the weight room to show you a couple others, I'll show you this easy one here. This is just a basic hand spreader exercise. This is something that is very specific to our disc golf putting, because when we pop our hand, typically we do some sort of hand opening like this. I'll show you quickly what your forearm looks like when you're opening your hand. This works that area of the muscle. These are called our forearm extensor muscles. This portion, which we typically think of our forearm, those are our flexor muscles, and I'll show you a couple things to work on those as well. Here's some rear to front rotations, great for the brachioradialis, also some grip strength. Once again, 2 to 3 sets of 10 to 15 repetitions will really do you well on this. Also, we have our reverse curls. Those really help out as well. Once again, sticking with the same sets and reps. You can also mix and match these exercises to fit your workout however you want. Here are some regular wrist curls. There's a lot of ways you can do these. I'm just showing these with this light dumbbell here. Before I move on to our core and our legs, let me talk a little bit about our arm. One thing we want to make sure we do is keep our arm loose. We really want to create a whip-like effect to maximize our pop and power in our putt. And in order to do that, we really need to relax, in particular the area of our upper arm. I know myself, sometimes when I get a long putt, I really stiffen up and try to muscle that putt, or at least I did until I drilled it in my head. We really need to get this arm loose and create a whip where our hand is that tip of the whip and really pop it out of the hand depending on which version of a putt we do. When we keep our arm loose, I've also found if I start a little bit with the elbow first, nothing crazy, but if I get a little bit of elbow first, that actually gives me a little bit extra zing in my putt as well. Here's a drill I'm working on starting with my elbow, but keeping my arm stroke within the frame of the basket. I just do this without any disc. If you're working on strengthening your upper body throwing pattern, the medicine ball chest pass is an amazing drill, both straddle stance and split stance. Okay, let's talk about the main ways we use our lower half of our body to generate power. This is one of the most important areas where you can develop power and really get long distance in your putts. Talk about the two main styles of putts, our staggered stance and our straddle putt. Straddle putt is pretty straightforward because you're going to push from the ground to generate that power into the disc. One tip that I will have that I use for my weightlifting when I train athletes is we want to have our 3 points of our foot on the ground, and that will help us push better. Our heel, big toe, and that little knuckle for our pinky toe area. We want to push off those 3, making a little triangle that will maximize our power through our legs up into our body. To strengthen the pattern of our straddle putt, our goblet squat is a great option. It works on the strength and mobility of our lower half. Also works in the same pattern as our straddle putt. 2 to 3 sets of 10, just make sure you're working yourself up. Getting power from our staggered stance putt is going to be a little different because there's so many varieties of staggered stance that we can do, but we can talk about our push from our back leg, which is really important. So the more push you have off your back leg, the wider your stance should be. This will help us remain balanced and control our body as we're developing that power through the lower half into our disc. When we talk about our staggered stance, we really need to talk about a couple of different things. There's one, we can get our back leg push, really kind of compressing our back leg down on the ground and getting pushed through here out into our disc. Second way we can develop this power is to go back and forth, kind of leaning back like this and pushing forward. Once again, looking like this. May have some sort of rock or something like that. Pull quin squat is a great way to strengthen this pattern. It's also phenomenal for knee health. Notice my non-working leg is straight and my toes pointing towards the sky, where my weight is all on my working leg. It's also important we don't change our posture at all as we're going down in this motion, and that we're not having any knee pain. You can actually start with no plates at all, and you can do it body weight, medicine ball, weights, whatever works for you. Our third way is really not using much leg at all. Prime example will be Kelvin Heimberg. He gets his power from his hip hinge right here and his core. The kickstand deadlift is a great way to strengthen your posterior chain and also your hip hinge. 90% of my weight is on my front foot, and I'm really working hard on keeping my back straight. 2 sets of 10, 3 sets of 10 work just fine. We also have the sitting good mornings. This is great for lengthening the motion and mobility in our back, and also working on that great posture that I mentioned before. Lots of different ways you can do it here. I do 2 or 3 sets of 10 when I do this, just focusing on correct posture. People who do that should probably have a narrower stance, and people who really push should have a wider stance. There's 2 different kinds of leg kicks most players use, what I mainly see. One, there's kind of like a donkey kick. This is more like what Paul Macbeth uses whenever he wants to develop a lot of power, and one that's a little bit straighter, more like this. Either way, whichever way you kick, one good tip to get the power and timing correct is we want to have our leg kick as we're releasing the disc. This is going to do 2 things. One, it's going to get that timing of the power into that disc to maximize the tip of the whip, but also keep your body on the line of the disc. So what is the line of the disc? The line of the disc is just simply keeping your disc in a straight line directly to the center pole of the basket. I know it seems pretty elementary, but no matter what your stance is, you want to make sure that disc, no matter what our body is doing, is going in the straight line of the disc. However, it doesn't really account for how we use our lower half. A lot of times people lack the strength, flexibility, and mobility to make this disc travel on the line of the disc, not only down, but also up and out through your hand. For example, if I just do a putt and I have our little donkey kick and I go out here, I don't have the proper balance and flexibility, this could make my disc go this way off the line of the disc. Okay, or if I have my straight leg kick and I don't have enough strength in my back hip, okay, it could cause me to just misalign my body and miss to the right. Another example of our line of the disc is if we're straddle putting and we come down, when we come up, we need to make sure we're getting the proper extension directly towards the basket as we're pushing up through the disc. And a lot of times what people do when they push, they go to the right because they're trying to throw the disc and get a little extra power that way. So this is a really great tool for just kind of making sure you're going straight at the basket, regardless of what your technique might be in making a putt. Here's 2 great ways to strengthen and mobilize our back leg kick. The first one is our side leg raise. I do this almost every day, 1 or 2 sets of 20 on each side of my leg. You will really feel it in your hips, really getting that strength and stabilization in there. Second move is a scorpion. We really want to activate this movement from our glutes and keep our posture in the front part strong. This is not for everybody. If you've got problems with your back, you might want to do some lead-up activities, but I like to do 1 set of 10, maybe 2 sets of 10 if I'm really feeling it that day. But once again, this is an advanced move, so if you're just starting out, you need to work into it. Our next move that not only helps our general back leg kick, but also our overall power is the backwards lunge. difference between the backwards and forward lunge is where the weight and the pressure is. This is more glute oriented as opposed to knee oriented, which helps a lot of people. Just make sure we're keeping that good posture, 2 sets of 10. I had a mic fail. I was doing this live. This is one of my drills I like to do, focusing on line of the disc, setting up a putt about 45 feet away, focusing on keeping my body and disc in that line of the disc while keeping my arm smooth. I'm going to run it live here to show you the results don't necessarily matter, just keeping that arm loose and getting the good spin and power. The line of that disc, once again, goes from our back foot all the way to release point. Here's our first, good power, just missed, poor release point. See if I can correct it on these two. There we go, right in the right spot. Notice just not muscling up. I'm also keeping my hand up on the follow through until the disc hits the chains. Here's another look. Notice I'm not throwing it too high. And if you follow some of these tips, maybe you can make some live ones like this. All right, that's all I've got for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it and you've got some good tips that helped you out. Go ahead and shoot in the comments. What was your favorite tip? And also, if you've got another putting tip that would really help everybody else out, shoot that in there as well. Let's help each other out. If you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button. Go ahead and share it. Spread the wealth for everybody. Let me know if there's anything else in the comments you would like for me to break down next, and I'll give it my best shot. Until next time,